Hello and welcome to day 4. We're so excited for the finale. If you're able, go ahead and turn on your camera. If not, please continue to use the chat as you've been doing. As always, Carmine and Vanessa will stay for that extra 15 minutes at the end of class for that informal optional Q&A. We hope that you can join us. And just a quick note, and I'll remind people at the end as well, that we're so lucky to have Carmine and Vanessa this summer as well for the in-person iteration of Presenting with Confidence and the add-on to that, which is Persuasive Leadership, Advanced Storytelling, and Investor Pitching in the Age of AI. So I'll put those links in the chat. But for now, Vanessa, please, over to you.
Great. Thank you. How is everyone today? Good. All right. So before I start, I work with a lot of executives that Carmine and I work with, and a lot of people get intimidated when they know my background's in psychology. And I just wanted to tell you a short bit of how I came to be interested in psychology. I've always been very analytical. Even as a child, I recall my parents and friends always teasing me because I could either read their mind or, you know, I'm too quick to judge how they move or what they say. Even my teenage daughters tease me still. But that interest in people is rooted to childhood. And eventually I decided, you know what, I'm going to study psychology because I think that people are fascinating and they're all individuals. Some of you probably have, maybe some of you haven't. There's a famous line in Forrest Gump that says, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And I believe that about people and individuals, and that crosses over to communication. Thank you, Carmine. He's pulling up my slides. And what's the phrase that you see here on this slide? What does it say? Anyone?
Authentic.
Authentic. Deliver an authentic story. That's what our focus is today. So if there's one thing in the spirit of logline, Carmine, if there's one thing I want you to take away from today, it's that you need to be yourself to deliver an authentic story. And so we have a model that I'm going to teach you about that communicates this. Before I go through this model, I'm going to ask you, and I'd love to get one or two people to speak up so I can hear from you. That's how I get to know you as a person. What qualities do inspiring communicators share? So when you see someone communicating or presenting, what is it about their behavior or what they're doing that makes you feel inspired or that gives you the impression that they're a great communicator? Oh, I see in the chat, passion about what you're doing. Nancy, I see your hand is up.
They tell you their stories in a relatable way, right?
Yes.
So oftentimes you might be watching very like super smart people, but they're telling you a story that is relatable in the words that they use or the story that they tell.
Yes, that's good. And I see also, Nancy, in the chat, someone is saying vulnerability and belief, engaging. That is true. So remember, especially if you're speaking to audiences that you've never met before, you know what the human brain is doing? They're sizing you up. They're looking at your outfit. They're looking at how you walk on the stage. They're analyzing what you look like and how you move. They haven't even, that's what their brain's doing. So it's important that that you become relatable so that there's something about you they can connect with. And then once they feel connected, then they'll be able to listen to what you have to say. So let's talk now about this model. You can follow along in the workbook on page 27. This is a model I developed that we use at Gallo Communications that I feel is simple and it's very empowering. So you'll figure that out as I explain it. So in the spirit of psychology, and mind you, my background is developmental psychology, which is all research, all analytical. I did not do clinical or other areas of psychology. So that's why this model I value because I need this to be tangible, right? Communicating is a soft skill. It's not a hard science. How do you change something that is not tangible? It needs to be made measurable. So this model that I'm going to teach you is simple, and it helps me make moving the needle on communication easier, which is what we all want to do. That's why you're all here, to learn how to be more confident, to be more impactful. There are 3 variables that develop someone as a spokesperson, and the 3 are ability, message, and practice. Spirit of the rule of 3, very simple. Now, I believe that ability is a constant variable. So what do I mean by a constant variable? If a variable is constant, what does that mean?
Doesn't change.
Doesn't change.
Born with it, yeah.
Now, obviously, there's probably some wiggle room there, but I believe natural ability doesn't change. What is natural ability? So when I analyze a video of a client, the first thing I'm doing as a coach, I'm putting on my coaching hat. What does this person do well already that lends itself well to communication? So I need to identify what are the natural abilities. This could be vocal tone, which is something you're born with, right? Some actors and famous speakers just sound good when they're talking. They're born with that tone. It could be you might have athletics or performing arts in your background. So by default, you have really good posture. You command the stage well. You hold yourself up. You look athletic. That's a strength. You could have height, which is a natural thing that you're born with that helps you command presence. It could also be that you are a really good writer. You might be nervous about speaking in front of people, but you're really good with words, or you're highly creative. You come up with metaphors very easily. That's a natural ability. There are so many different natural abilities, and each one of you is going to possess different natural abilities. But it's important that you identify what those are first. Don't focus on your flaws, focus on your strengths. Okay, so once as a coach, I know what your natural ability is. I put that aside. Now I'm going to focus on the other 2, message and practice, which are not constant variables. So not constant is the flip of that, right? They are changeable. You can manipulate these 2 as much as your heart desires. And I guarantee you, if you focus on message, and when I say focus on message, I mean all those wonderful tactics that Carmine taught us: stories, log lines, rule of 3, meaningful stats. What are those things that I can do to make my message compelling and interesting and worthy to remember once my audience leaves? You can do that as much as you want. It's up to you. And practice. Practice is important. Practice, yes, can mean that you deliberately go through your presentation word for word until you have it memorized, but it also means exploring with using different stories. Practice those in different contexts. Do they work? Do people like them? Yes, I'll use them again. Practice could mean share my content with a coworker or a partner and get their feedback. Do you like it? Is it too long? Timing yourself. Am I long-winded? So let's talk about this model. How does this work? You can actually follow along with this on page 28 in your workbook. Let's pretend these 2 people that you see on the slide are both equally great presenters. They're strong communicators. How they got there is different because they're individual people. Humans are different. They're not all the same. So the person on our left, 50% of why she's a great communicator is because she had a lot of natural abilities to work with, a great slate to start with, but she did not get to 100% with just that. She still had to focus on messaging and a little bit of time on practice. Someone who has a lot of natural abilities, practice for them is making sure they stay on time, making sure they don't talk too much, making sure they advance their slides at the same point that they're talking. So practice takes on a little different form, but they still have to do it. The person on the right, only 20% is attributed to natural ability. He had to put in a lot more practice and equal amount of time with crafting strong messaging, but they both got there. So this is why I love this model, because it takes the pressure off of our backs, takes that chip off our shoulder. You don't have to change who you are. You just have to be willing to invest in message and practice. And if you do those two things, by default, you will become more passionate. You will have more energy. You'll come across more dynamic. It happens by default. But it's very important that you identify your strengths. Hopefully, Sonia, you're okay with this. Last night, she shared with me a recent presentation she gave just yesterday, where she applied several of the tactics that we've learned over the last 3 sessions, log line, story, rule of 3, and she had huge success. So many comments, so much engagement from her audience of how well they received it. So that kind of information just confirms that if you apply the tactics to your message and you put it into play like Sonia did yesterday, you will get better. You will come across, you will find the success that you want to be received better by your audience. And so that's empowering, because it means you can apply this immediately. You don't have to take this 4-session course and not apply it. So thank you, Sonia, for sharing that story. What I want us to do now is I want us to practice being our own coach. So I want to engage in a video analysis activity with you. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to show you what I would do as a coach if someone came to me or sent me a video sample, and I know that this person wants me to help them become a more dynamic, more engaging communicator. So you can follow along page 29. There's a place to write notes if you'd like to write notes. And really the challenge here is it's very easy for us as humans to criticize. Like if Carmine and I are watching a movie or we're watching an award show, the first thing we do is make fun of somebody's outfit, or why are they saying that? Why are they doing that? That's human nature, right? It goes against our grain to focus on the positive, but that is exactly what we need to do if you're watching your own video and trying to coaching yourself, or you have teams that you lead or manage. Challenge yourself to find the strengths. So this first clip we're going to watch, this is one of Jeff Bezos's first public presentations. It was a keynote speech at Lake Forest University in 1998. And so you will definitely see that he's not as smooth as he could be. And I know that we saw a clip of him, or we talked about him earlier in the course, and someone said, yeah, he's not as good as he could be, but you will see in this activity how much he's changed over the years. So in this first clip, what I want you to do is focus on what you think his natural abilities are, as we see in this video sample. So we're being analytical, we're being researchers, we're trying not to be subjective but objective, and we're just going to record what we think the strengths are as we see in this sample. Let's watch.
So we opened the store in July of 1995, almost 3 years ago now, after doing about a year of software development. And the store has grown very rapidly. At this point, our sales are about the equivalent of 50 of those big chain superstores. And the interesting thing is that we opened the equivalent of 12 of those superstores in just the last 3 months. So things are growing fast. We ship books regularly to over 160 different countries. In our first 30 days of being open, we shipped books to more than 45 countries in all 50 states. There are some interesting stories about the international. So,
all right, let's discuss. You're welcome to put your ideas in the chat, but I would love to hear some of your voices. What do you think his strengths are, as we saw in that sample? Looks like we have Oliver's hand is up.
Yeah, sorry, I just had to unmute. As you actually said, Vanessa, the weaknesses immediately strike, right? Not that I'm a better presenter, but I'm just saying. But still, I think the strength here is that you can really see he knows his stuff. So he knows his details because he has this data, and he is, even what we've learned, relating some of the numbers to this is the equivalent of a superstore or whatever that is. I just think it was a little bit too quick and too many numbers, by the way. If he had just slowed it down a little less, he was there.
Yes.
But if you have I know you said what this was, but if you have the right audience, I think you could still get across what he wanted to say. He does say a lot of and and
Yes, definitely.
which yeah.
So Oliver, what I see, he's good with numbers. This guy is smart and he knows his topic. So that's his strength. Check. Looks like we had Sia. I saw you were up. I want to hear from Sia and then Sonia. Where's Sia?
Right here. Yeah, no, just piggybacking off of Oliver, I just think that he lists a lot of great data points. And so if we were to go back to the beginning of the course and we talked about storytelling, he took me on a journey through his data points. I can visualize the countries, I can visualize what 30 days were. Like that to me was a strength.
Yes, I definitely think so. He opened in the first 30 days, they've opened more than 45 in all 50 states. So not only is he good with data, Sia, but that also tells me he's creative. So we've got some wiggle room there with that mindset. Sonia, what's your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
I thought he had good gestures, hand gestures. He didn't stand there like a stiff. He had good eye contact with the audience. And I thought he had good voice inflection. I didn't think he was monotone.
Yes, so I do see the potential there. You, as Oliver mentioned, he did use a lot of ums and ahs, but I can tell that he's nervous. But I also see the potential there, Sonia, that he does instinctively want to engage people. He's trying to look at the audience, and he takes his hands apart, but then he brings them back again. So he's in a mental tug of war right now. He knows that he wants to talk to the people in front of him, but then he's kind of nervous and pulls back. So there's potential here. So now what I'd like us to do is watch a clip of him almost 2 decades later. You are going to see creativity. You're going to see topic knowledge, creative use of data. You're going to see all those things that existed in that earlier sample will still exist, if not be even better, because that's what happens with your strengths. The more you deliver communication, those strengths that you had a long time ago, they're always going to be there. They're just going to get more powerful. But what we are going to see, the ums and ahs disappear. And the last clip we just saw, it was hard for me to remember a phrase. I couldn't see the periods in his sentences. There were a lot of run-on sentences, a lot of conjuncted sentences. Let's watch this clip and notice how he's changed with manipulation of his message and practice time over the years. Look what that does to him as he comes across in his delivery.
If that does not inspire you, you are at the wrong event. You don't choose your passions. Your passions choose you. When I was 5 years old, I watched what you just rewatched, and it had a huge impact on me. And it hasn't changed. None of that passion has gone away. This is me in high school, and I want to highlight this quote: "The earth is finite, and if the world economy and population is to keep expanding, space is the only way to go." I still believe that. By the way, this is also my version of a misspent youth. Guess what the best planet is in this solar system? It's easy to know the answer to that question. We've sent robotic probes like this one to all the planets in our solar system now. Some of them have been flybys, but we've examined them all. Earth is the best planet.
All right. Now, big difference. I think we can all agree there's a big difference there. That's what happens when you put yourself out there, like he obviously has had to as CEO of his company over the years. You get better with time, as with any skill. Carmine's a golfer. He's much better now, 28 years later than when we first met because he puts in the time.
By
Any
a few
skill,
strokes, yes, that's true.
any skill you have to put in the time and you will get better. What I'd like some of you to share with me, were there any lines in this speech we just saw that you remember and now that it's over? Any memorable lines from his speech that just pop out in your head? Passions choose you. Zach's in the chat. That one was the strongest one for me. You don't choose your passions choose you. Anything else, Sonia?
I thought he was funny when he said something about a misspent youth, example of a misspent youth, and everybody laughed. So he added a little bit of humor in there.
Yes, I see in the chat, Oliver said Earth is the best planet, and he delivered it like that. Earth is the best planet. He rushed a lot in the earlier sample. Now he's thinking about, he's more comfortable in his skin. He's relaxed. He's able to kind of play around with the pause and how to use his voice. That's easier because he's put in the time. He's practiced enough that he's more comfortable in his skin. I'm looking at the chat now. Lots of great comments. He left the podium behind and his presence was much stronger, much more confident. He used visuals in his speech. You're getting the drift. This is an example of how the strengths you possess today in this class are in your toolkit as a communicator, and they will always be there. You have to identify what those are. I want to do one more example. This time I'm going to do someone who's doesn't have his completely different personality as Jeff Bezos, different temperament. She also has different strengths. She is very well known for writing this book on the power of being an introvert. It's called Quiet, and she also has a very famous TED Talk. So you can also write notes in the workbook on page 29. We're going to watch a clip of her in 2012, and I want you to be focusing on what are her strengths, and then we will discuss. Let's watch.
Hi, everyone. Well, I have come to believe from researching and writing this book for about 7 years now, started back in 2005. I've come to believe that introversion and extroversion are as profound a part of who we are, as core to our identities as our gender, and that therefore it's very important to understand where we truly fall on the introvert-extrovert spectrum. And when I say this, I'm not talking about where we appear to fall or, who we appear to be, because most of us in this extroverted culture of ours act much more extroverted than we really are. So what I'm asking is who you are deep down, if you could spend your time exactly as you pleased, your work days, your weekends, who would you be? Would you be more of an introvert or would you be more of an extrovert? And this is a really important question, so I want us to get to the answer, get to the bottom of it before we move forward with the talk.
Okay, let's talk about her strengths. What do you think her strengths are in this sample, just as we see it? Anybody who hasn't spoken, love to hear from you. This is fun. Remember, I like people. I like to see the box of chocolates. Okay, is it Teo or Teo?
Teo.
Teo.
Yep. So I think she's relatable. She seems, even though she's a little bit nervous, as you can hear in her voice occasionally, she comes across as quite confident, very comfortable in the content matter that she's presenting, very passionate about it. And so it makes, at least it made me it drew me into what she had to say. And also I think she posed a very interesting comparison, the introvert, extrovert, in the context of gender identity. So I felt like she had a lot of positives in the little clip that we saw.
Yeah, she does. She has a lot of great stuff to work with. I noticed in the chat, Aaron said approachable and friendly. So I would, as a coach, the first thing I put was expressive face. So just to demonstrate that, what I mean, so I'm going to cover my eyes, right? Okay, now, do you see a difference in my eyes from now to now? You can see energy in the eyes, right? She has that in abundance. Like When I look at her, she'd be the person in a department store that I would walk up to and say, "Where are the shoes?" And she would say, "No, I don't work here." It's because she has a very approachable face, very user friendly, as I would say. That's an asset as a communicator. So before even saying anything, she's breaking a barrier between her and the audience because she has a very expressive face. That's helpful. When someone is not expressive, it's hard to read them. I actually worked with some Green Berets out of North Carolina with Carmine, who were now retired from their role, but they were in a training facility training new elite military personnel coming through the ranks. And I worked with 2 snipers. You know how hard it is to teach a sniper how to be expressive? It's very hard.
They're
But
trying not to be expressive for hours. Yeah.
yeah, so
And
exactly.
suddenly they were PowerPoint presenters. Imagine this.
Yeah, it's so the fact that she's very expressive is great. I like that. Someone in the chat also said was very clear. Edward said very clear what the point was. Yes, I do believe she was very clear. Any other comments or thoughts? Yeah, I also see 7 years of research means she probably knows her topic. Yes, I agree with that. I think she's got an expressive face. She's got great topic knowledge, and she's pretty clear in how she communicates. She didn't use a lot of ums or ahs. However, I noticed as a coach, okay, so now I know what her abilities are. What do I have to work on with her over the next few coaching sessions? She uses too many words. And I believe because she's a little nervous, her crutch are words. So I noticed she used the phrase, "I have come to believe," twice. And she doesn't even need to say any of those words. So, for example, I have come to believe that logline is a very valuable tactic. Or I could say, the logline is a very valuable tactic. So, which phrase sounds more powerful, more assertive? The second one. So, she needs to work on trimming her words. She would say things like, and this is a really important question. So it's important that we get to the bottom or the answer to this question. She could just replace that with, "This is important. Let's find out what the answer is." So that's me as a coach. She's got great assets to work with. Now I'm going to work with her on her messaging. So I'm going to want to transcribe her speech, and I'm going to go through her speech with a fine tooth comb, and I'm going to X off everything she doesn't need. And then we're going to massage and treat her messaging to clean it up a little, take out the ands and the buts, put more shorter, tighter sentences so they're easy to deliver vocally. And then we're going to go do it again. And so let's watch this next clip of her 10 years later. You will find that her language is still long-winded, but not as bad. It's a little tighter. I didn't hear "I've come to believe" twice. I didn't hear the word "so" a lot. She seems much more confident, and all those natural abilities that we just identified are still there. Let's watch.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here with you today. We're going to now talk about a very different kind of energy for the next 40 minutes. We're going to talk about the power of introverts in this decidedly extroverted culture of ours. And I thought that I would start off by just telling you a quick story, because people often ask me how it is that I came to be so passionate about this topic in the first place. And I'm sure this is true for many of you too, who are really passionate about the things that you do, that you can trace the roots of that passion early in your childhood. And that's how it is with me. So I'm going to tell you this story about the time that I was 9 years old. And I went off to summer camp for the first time. And my mother packed for me a suitcase full of books, which in our house was a very natural thing to do if you were going off to the woods for 8 weeks.
All right. What are your thoughts on this one? Any comments from 10 years ago to now? What do you see? What do you notice? Thoughts? What comes to your head? Oh, it looks like, here we go, Zach. Now my audio's back on. Sorry about that. Yes, Zach,
Uh,
please share. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just her stage presence was much more confident, and she looked more comfortable.
Definitely a relatable story. Oliver mentioned no podium. She definitely has more of a TED stage feel to her. Any other thoughts, comments? Hopefully this is getting your brains thinking about how to be a good communicator, how to develop as a communicator. You know what I noticed? If she was still if this was a client that was still coming to me, I'd still be working on her script. There was a part where she was going to tell us a story, and she says, I'm going to tell you a story about a time when I was 9 years old. I would just take that all out and I would say, when I was 9 years old, XYZ. So I do this with Carmine. We're constantly going over our writing. He writes for Forbes and Inc. Sometimes I'll read his articles, and you don't need this sentence. You don't need this line. There's a lot of AI tools, Grammarly, and other tools that you can use that will tell you you should be wording it this way. You're using too much passive voice. You should be using more active voice. So be open-minded to that. It makes a difference in vocal delivery. If what you're saying is fragmented or long sentences or clunky, the vocal delivery of it is going to be clunky. So be creative with your scripts, be open-minded to kind of examining yourself. I noticed in the chat, Mona had asked, is there a list of criteria we can follow to assess a person in terms of strengths, area of improvement? You know, I think some people, like I'm very analytical. It's easy for me to be objective when I'm looking at a sample. I'm not looking at flaws and I'm only looking at what I hear and see. It takes time and practice, but I think we all have instinct, right? When you watch somebody communicate, you can tell right away what they do well or not. And it takes practice, but it's really, Mona, and this is for all of you, it's just about being open-minded and stop looking at the glass as half empty and look at it as what does this person do well? Because you need something to work with. And I guarantee every single one of you has a strength. What I'd like to do now is show you this video before we move on to another idea. This is an actual interview that Carmine did with Susan Cain. And I like this video because she explains how she overcame her issues with communicating in public. As an introvert, she was not as confident. She didn't feel as confident and she was kind of scared to do it. And I like her perspective and I like the way she talks to how do you get over the stage fright. Let's listen to her.
And she was, Vanessa, she wasn't just scared. I remember my conversation with Susan Cain. She put off public speaking for years because she was terrified of speaking in public at all.
All right, let's watch.
Good reminder for all of us.
The way to overcome any fear, particularly speaking, but really anything, is to expose yourself to the thing you fear in very small doses. So you can't start out by giving TED Talks. You have to start out like exactly the opposite. You know, I recommend people to go to Toastmasters, which is designed to give you a safe and supportive environment where it doesn't matter how much you screw up and you can take as much time as you need. It could take you years. Maybe it will take you years until you feel comfortable, but little by little by little, you're basically retraining your brain to, right now, if you're a nervous speaker, it's your brain thinks that being on a stage is dangerous in the way that a saber-toothed tiger is dangerous. So your brain is telling you, get the hell off the stage. What you want to be doing is having enough successful experiences in these small bite-sized steps that you're retraining your brain that the stage is not dangerous. You know, it's more of a daffodil than a tiger.
More than a daffodil than a tiger. That's a good one. And that is the point, to practice, right? You put in the practice time and you see more daffodils, less tigers, but you've got to put in the work. So I do want to talk a little before we talk about practice, which is the other big piece of how we change as our presence and how we communicate. Message impacts delivery. I will get clients that come to me and say, oh, I know what I'm going to say. I'm really good at talking, but I need to use more gestures. Or someone said I need to stand this way or do this. In my mind, they're looking at it wrong, because you cannot separate the body from the message. Can't do that. It's impossible. So your message does impact your delivery. And I want to engage you in a short activity here to demonstrate how that works. So we're going to watch another clip, 2 clips of Brian Stevenson. We watched a clip of him earlier in the course from Carmine. He was focusing on storytelling. And Brian Stevenson is actually a mastermind at telling story to connect with his audience. I'm going to show you 2 separate clips from the same speech. And it's going to show you how the type of content he is saying is impacting his expression. So what I want you to be focusing on in this clip is his face and how often does he smile. Let's watch.
You know, ultimately, we all have to believe things we haven't seen. We do. As rational as we are, as committed to intellect as we are, innovation, creativity, development comes not from the ideas in our mind alone. They come from the ideas in our mind that are also fueled by some conviction in our heart. And it's that mind-heart connection that I believe compels us to not just be attentive to all the bright and dazzling things, but also the dark and difficult things. Václav Havel, the great Czech leader, talked about this. He said, when we were in Eastern Europe and dealing with oppression, we wanted all kinds of things, but mostly what we needed was hope, an orientation of the spirit, a willingness to sometimes be in hopeless places and be a witness. Well, that orientation of the spirit is very much at the core of what I believe even TED communities have to be engaged in.
Okay. Anybody can speak, just raise your hand. What did you notice about his smiling behavior? Dre.
I noticed that his tonality, apologies, the tonality of his speech kind of matched the tonality of his face.
Definitely. You can definitely see the connection there, the tonality. I like that word, actually. I've never used that word, but I like what you're saying. Any other comments or thoughts?
From me, or sorry?
Or anyone. Thank you, Dre.
No worries.
You know, the Zoom is a fascinating thing. You only see the faces that are, you only see a person's face when they start talking. That's why I always like when people raise their hand. So it's interesting. You didn't see any smiling, really. There were only 2 places where there was a crack of a smile. He said, mind-heart connection. There was a baby smile. And then he said, even in TED communities, there was a crack of a smile. That's it. So what's the point to this? The point to this is, if you're not smiling in your presentation, it's not a bad thing. But if you are limited on your natural ability and you're not smiling, I guarantee you need to do some more smiling. And the only way to do authentic smiling is to say something that lends itself to smiling. So you'll see in the workbook on page 30, smiling behavior. When do you smile? When you're sharing a story or personal content, or if you're communicating content that is emotional in nature, or if it's humorous. Smiling behavior increases and facial expressions are often more dynamic in those contexts. So for Brian Stevenson, he doesn't necessarily need to smile. He's got a lot of natural abilities, great posture, good voice. He's clear, concise. He's not reading from notes. He uses great gestures. He's got so many natural abilities that it's okay if he doesn't smile. But we have some executives that come to us that specifically say, I need to build more rapport with my audience. I'm being sent to you because my boss says I can't connect with my listeners. I look at their videos and I see exactly why. 100% of what they're communicating is data, charts, content, logical information. There is no pathos. So the best way to get them to be more dynamic, have better facial expression, is to figure out, okay, we need to put at least 2 stories or 2 metaphors or 2 case examples or 2 anything that's emotional in nature. We as a team will decide where it goes in this presentation. And by default, you will be more expressive when you communicate that content. So let's watch this next clip. What happens to Brian Stevenson's face when the actual content of what he's saying is emotional in nature? Let's watch.
And every now and then Miss Carr would call me and she'd say, Brian, Miss Parks is coming to town and we're going to get together and talk. Do you want to come over and listen? And I'd say, yes, ma'am, I do. And she said, well, what are you going to do when you get here? I said, I'm going to listen. And I'd go over there and I would just listen. It would be so energizing and so empowering. And one time I was over there listening to these women talk, and after a couple of hours, Ms. Parks turned to me and she said, now, Brian, tell me what the Equal Justice Initiative is. Tell me what you're trying to do. I began giving her my rap. I said, well, we're trying to challenge injustice. We're trying to help people who've been wrongly convicted. We're trying to confront bias and discrimination in the administration of criminal justice. We're trying to end life without parole sentences for children. We're trying to do something about the death penalty. We're trying to reduce the prison population. We're trying to end mass incarceration. I gave her my whole rap, and when I finished, she looked at me and she said, She said, that's going to make you tired, tired, tired. And that's when Ms. Carr leaned forward. She put her finger on my face and said, that's why you've got to be brave, brave, brave.
All right, that's lots of expression there in his face. Any thoughts or comments as we watch this second clip from the same speech? Oliver.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, it felt definitely lighter in delivery. Maybe it is also because it's a funny story now and not just a content as such. Equally, the message comes across, and then he seems to also naturally smiling. You know, it's not like just smile because it is a funny story. So it complements the story really nicely, actually.
Yes, definitely. You know, that's the key there. It needs to be natural. I don't want you to smile on purpose. And I don't expect people, I don't want people to overthink their body or their face or hands. Don't do that. What I want you to do is overthink your message. Do I have a log line? Do I have something interesting in here? A creative way to package this data, or a metaphor, or a story, or a case example from another client? Do I have anything in here that's emotional in nature? If you do, then I guarantee as you practice, it will come across more dynamic with more energy. I also noticed the comment Andrea says he speeds up and slows down the words based on the intensity of the words. Key messages said slowly. Yes, that's a good point. So with that thought, Andrea, everybody look at your workbook on page 30. Vocal delivery is impacted by your message, right? So when you're saying something important or somber, or when the presenter is confused or does not have content internalized, pace is slower. So this is where it gets tricky. If someone is talking slow, it could be for many different reasons. And the only way to understand the reasoning is if you take all the other factors into account when you're making an observation. So obviously he's not confused and he has his information internalized because he's not looking at a prompter, he's looking at us in the face. So his reason is because he's saying something very important. So I'm going to slow it down, right? Effective gestures. When you're telling a story, you're more likely to use gestures versus when you're not. So the importance of this is don't worry about changing your body. Don't overthink your gestures or your face. Overthink your message. Going back to ability message practice. You will become more dynamic, higher energy, show more passion if you really think about how impactful your message is and put in the practice time. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about practice now. And there's this quote that I love from Carmine's book, The Bezos Blueprint. And he's here with us, so don't feel funny that I'm pointing you out, Carmine. But I love this quote. Practice is not something you do because you're bad. Practice is something you do because you're good. And that's like when you watch American Idol or The Voice. and someone gets up there and they're not really a good singer, but they think they are, I guarantee most of the executives that come to us are already good, but they're coming to us because people who are good at something instinctively know you always have to learn to continue to be good and to continue to challenge yourself. So you're all taking this class because you instinctively know investing in yourself in this particular skill is going to make you better. So that's telling me you're already good at what you do. You're just trying to learn tactics. I want to share with you a rehearsal strategy that Steve Jobs used. And I'm going to pass it to Carmine for this part because Carmine is the one who wrote the presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs several years ago. And he worked closely with executives who helped prep Steve Jobs for some of his big keynotes. And there is a methodical 5-step rehearsal strategy that he used. Now, does this mean you have to adopt this? No. But as a communication expert, I always like to see what other great communicators do and learn from it and pick and choose what I want from what they do. So Carmine, I'm going to pass it to you and you can kind of walk us through this. You can follow along. Also in your workbook, I have this itemized. I believe it's on page 33.
33. Yeah.
Oh, real quick though, before you talk about Steve Jobs' rehearsal strategy, in the workbook on page 31 and 32 is a tool for you to have after this course. It's not something we need to cover today, but I call it a 4-step messaging checklist. This is a system that I do. If I'm having to give a presentation, I'm going to be asking myself, number one, who's the audience? And then once I figure that out, then I'm going to do step 2, develop a log line. Okay, so now that I know my audience and what they need, what's the one thing I want them to get out of this? Then I'm going to build out the story. The rest of the slides is all going to go back to that log line. And then the very last part of it on page 32 would be, okay, now you're going to tell the story in pictures. What am I going to use to complement this content? So I include this checklist in your workbook so you can use it as a tool later. So Carmine, now I'm going to pass it to you for a 5-step rehearsal.
Yeah, thanks. We put this on page 33 of your workbook, so you don't have to try to write down anything from these slides. These slides are on page 33. The point of this is that when I was writing a book on Steve Jobs, a lot of people would say, oh, well, he's so charismatic. He's so good on stage. Well, what I learned, and this applies to almost any great speaker who Vanessa and I, who I've written about or who we've met, they work at it. They weren't naturally good. It took time for them to get comfortable. And Steve Jobs was exactly like that. During my interviews for the book, I spoke to an engineer who had a rare opportunity to actually be in the rehearsal room with Steve Jobs before some of his major keynotes. And Apple is very secretive, so they would only allow certain people into the room if they had something to do with that part of the presentation. But here is what the engineer, his name is Ken, here's what he told me. Because to him, it was a revelation too. Even within Apple, people assume, yeah, Steve, the CEO, he's great at presenting. He worked at it. First, start rehearsing early. Take a look at some of these photos. He's in shorts. He's in a sweatpants there. He's practicing. He's rehearsing. Ken said this is one of Steve's great secrets as a presenter. He practiced a lot. He went over and over the material until he had the presentation honed and he knew it cold. How many of us go over the material until we know it cold? Refine everything, every slide, every line, okay? The message, every gesture. That means he's thinking of this like a performance, isn't he? Steve thought about what each line meant to him and what those lines could mean to an audience. He worked on things like pace, using his voice, his body, his gestures to supplement his words. So again, this is a performance. A presentation is a performance, and he's rehearsing or practicing like a performance. I love this one because many of us do not do this. Rehearse out loud like it's the real thing. In rehearsal, Jobs raised the volume of his voice, changed the tone of his voice. He used expansive gestures like he was speaking to thousands, even if it was rehearsing in front of a handful of executives. He's using his space. He's on a big stage now, so he's going to use more expansive gestures. Ask for feedback. Another good tip. How many of us do that? Not very often. Deliver the presentation in front of people. Ask for feedback during each step of the performance. As needed, Jobs would stop, step out of character. I love the way he's describing this. Reduce the volume of his voice and ask executives seated in the front row what they thought of a phrase or whether they believed the slides were flowing together smoothly. Ask for feedback. Have a peer, trusted friend, watch your presentation and ask for feedback. Schedule rehearsals in real world conditions. He rehearsed, he practiced, he rehearsed the entire presentation twice every day. I'd never really quite understood for how long before the keynote, at least a week from what I recall, but he would rehearse it and it was in the calendar. These were what were called dress rehearsals because Steve Jobs showed up in his presentation uniform, black mock turtleneck and jeans. So that whole persona that we see of Steve Jobs, he usually wore sweatpants at work or sweat or shorts. He didn't always come with the black mock and the jeans, but that was the persona. That was the stage persona. So even when he practiced, he would put on a show. Put on what you're actually going to wear. So you see how deliberate this is. Very deliberate. And that's how you get better. Practice. And most people, honestly, at least many of the people who we've worked with, have never done that before. They just kind of flip through their slides. You know, you've seen this. Oh, yeah, I know what I'm going to say there. Okay, yeah, I think I'll be fine. And then they get nervous and things go wrong, or it's the projector is not working well, or it's not advancing. They haven't practiced the whole presentation from start to finish and done it several times before your real presentation.
I'm going to chime in, Carmine.
Yeah, please do.
And the reality is, in the work that we do, that's what me and Carmine do. So that's all we do. But in other career industries, I know with a lot of executives we work with, they have whole teams that support them that actually write their scripts and give them their slides. And they're always jet setting or in multiple meetings. And they literally will look at their presentation, 2 days before they have to give it. That's a reality, right? And each one of you has a different role and there's only so much time you have to put towards certain things. But even if it's not a big stage presentation, it could be a staff meeting, it could be an email report, it could be speaking to the board, pitching to a few people at a table, whatever it is, you should, at least in the spirit of the rule of three, come up with 3 things you can do before that meeting that you didn't do before that would be considered practice. So like if you don't have a log line, you better have one before. If there's one thing I could tell them, even if it's not in your script and it's not in the deck, if there's one thing I could say in the first 30 seconds, what would it be? You could do that. If you don't have an anecdote, a case example, or a story, you can come up with something there. And then I would at least go through your email, your script, your notes, your PowerPoint on a laptop, whatever the forum is or whatever the meeting is, go through it at least 3 times if you have to. And actually 10, it seems to be the magic number for what I'm hearing from some executives, that when they have bigger, crucial communication events, they do it at least 10 times. So this just gives you an idea. It's up to you how much you want to invest in this. It's completely up to you. If you want to continue to get by, do fine, you get your goals met in terms of the action you want your listeners to take, and your status quo is mediocre or it's doing fine, then that's okay. But if you really want to get to that higher level, you have to invest in this skill. It's up to you. So I'm going to pass it back to Carmine because there are a lot of presentations that we're still doing virtually.
Yeah.
We do this course on campus, which will take place in June, and we do it virtually as we're doing now. We have clients in maybe Switzerland or Germany or other places where it's more easier for us to do the coaching virtually versus go in person. So we're all doing virtual communication. So I do want to give it back to Carmine so he can kind of walk us through some tips that are important to keep in mind when you are delivering virtual presentations. And we documented this stuff on page 34 if you want to follow along.
This applies to everybody now, regardless of how the workplace is going to change. It doesn't matter. We're all going to continue to give more and more remote meetings, depending on whether you're going to be in the office or not. I get it, but I know a lot of financial planners, a lot of professionals in different industries, now customers and clients or investors prefer just to jump on a Zoom call or a Teams meeting. When you present virtually, when you're presenting remotely, there are a few things to keep in mind. Obviously, everything we've been talking about applies. And certainly some of those slide design concepts that we talked about on Monday certainly apply. If I cannot read your slides in person, I'm certainly not going to be able to read all the details on a virtual setting because I have an even smaller screen. I might be watching you on the laptop or on an iPad. So I certainly can't see all the detail. So I would suggest in a virtual setting, we keep our slides even more minimal than we would in person. Think about, so this is on page 34. Let's talk about the environment and your voice. How about the environment? The stage. What's your stage? That you're giving a performance. You may not be on a physical stage, but what's the setting? Think about the background. I could tell from Vanessa's background instantly that she is affiliated with a Harvard course. She's using the virtual background. That's fine if it's relevant, of course. I'm an author. I have hundreds of books at home and in the office. Okay, that makes sense. I've got some books here. I've got a few of mine that I'll reference. Okay, makes sense. If I'm a scientist, maybe I'll have a double helix DNA thing behind me. Think about the background. Think about that as well. Lighting, of course. Now, all of you know this instinctively by now because we've seen enough webinars, but I find that a lot of people aren't paying attention to it. If you're just attending a webinar, not a big deal. But if you're giving important presentations online, would you think about lighting a little bit? Because I still interview a lot of professionals. And even when I tell them I'm interviewing you for YouTube, they're in front of the window and they're silhouetted. It's all blacked out. I see outside. Okay. So you all know the simple tip is to make sure the light source is on the opposite side of the camera, that it's across from you. So I have a window and another light source across from me. Here, let me try something. What would happen? Okay, so no light. Well, see, that doesn't make that much of a difference today because the light source is coming from the window now.
Mine does.
But it helps.
So, Car, look at the difference when I turn my light source off. I mean, I don't look bad, but look what happens when I put the light on. Let's see.
Yeah.
It's much more visible. Yeah. Actually, I'm looking at everybody's avatars in the Zoom. Everybody has pretty good lighting.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've noticed that too. I think this is just now a lot more instinctive. And of course, think about wardrobe. Think about what you're wearing. Does it pop off the screen? Vanessa has told me, you've got salt and pepper hair, so don't wear all gray, especially on my YouTube videos. Okay, I get that. So I'll wear, a blue or something that kind of pops. See, Vanessa, I'm listening to your tips as we go.
Yeah, you still have a gray sweater on though. Haha.
I know. I did have my Harvard red though on my first
Yes,
version.
you did. You did. But you've got the blue coat, so that helps.
It's so cold this morning. I had to have multiple layers on.
But actually, Carmine's background is very clean and neutral. There's not a lot of distraction. But if he did have on gray and white, that's all I would see is just the same thing. But having color is helpful, or I would limit stripes and busy prints. You don't want anything to attract away from the communication source.
Also on page 34, your voice. A few people have asked about voice, vocal delivery. You heard Brian Stevenson. He's got great vocal delivery, but did you see how he varies his voice? This too takes practice. Think about the pace. Brian Stevenson would pick up the pace during certain times, and then he would slow down. Think about the pace so that it's different, it's modulated. Sometimes you can talk a little bit faster. You can get into some more information a little bit faster. Other times, we're going to slow down because this is important. Pause. No one does that. No one does. We're afraid of dead air. I'm certainly like that too. I've been able to catch myself on Zooms because I have to record a lot of the Zoom calls that I do, some of the interviews that you've seen, I record those. So I'm forced to watch myself back. I've had to learn this because I always want to jump in. Pause. People who edit the videos for me say, Carmine, years ago said, Carmine, we can't edit. You jump right in. Oh, I see. Pause. Okay. Good advice. Pause. Earth is the best planet. Period. Pause. Then move on. Enunciate so I can hear you clearly. Don't mumble, especially with contractions like can't and won't. It's not can't, won't. Yeah, we shouldn't do that. It's if I'm turned away from the microphone, I'm just doing a lot of this and talking down and just mumbling. What? Yeah, I can't hear you. I watch a lot of webinars, so I'm like, please enunciate into the microphone, please. And speaking of that, get a good microphone. Get a good microphone. I was online because I was thinking about this the other day, microphones, and I noticed that microphones that cost a lot of money about 4 years ago now are well under $100. That you can get a nice lavalier microphone that will go right here. Makes your voice sound amazing. You can plug it into your computer or your iPad. They've got USB or USB-C. I found one called Sennheiser on Amazon for like $60. Years ago, that was a couple $100. So now everything is coming down in price and easy to get. So get yourself a professional microphone. Get yourself a light. Yeah, between the two of them, you'll spend $50 to $80. Get those. They make a big difference. They'll make a really big difference if those virtual presentations are really important for your success and your career. If it's just you and your friends on a Friday night just getting together on Zoom to decide where to go to dinner, I don't care. Don't care about the lighting, don't care about anything else. But if it's a professional setting and you do give a lot of presentations online, keep all of these in mind. Vanessa, back to you.
All right, great. So now you understand the model, ability, message, practice. Those are the only 3 things you need to focus on to develop yourself so that you become more dynamic in your delivery, your presence, your body language. And when you do that, you will come across more confident by default. So what does confident body language look like? We all have an idea of what that means. When you have good posture, you're comfortable using gestures, you feel authentic and natural and calm and comfortable, in delivering, I want to share with you a study that speaks to the importance of presence, posture. And you can follow along. I have some information in the workbook on page 35. Can you judge an IPO by its CEO? This was a famous presentation study that was done where the participants had CEOs that they were going to look at. Actually, go to the next slide. They had these cursors that would hover over each avatar. And as you would click the avatar, it would show body movement and them talking, but you wouldn't hear any sound. So just presence, posture, gestures, and how they carried themselves. And then the participants were supposed to watch that and then rate the level of confidence based off the sample that they saw. And then they correlated the perceived confidence ratings with the price that the IPO launched at on the IPO event. And it was very interesting study. So you can kind of look at those avatars and kind of get an impression of who you think people might have perceived as being having more confidence. Is there anybody in here particular that stands out to you just looking at the avatar as who might have more confidence communicating? Any thoughts or ideas? Top left. Okay, so top left, I'm assuming it's because he seems to have relatively good posture and he's using his gestures. You can see them. Any other impressions on any of these other avatars who you think might exude more confidence? The middle, I would say the middle too. He's got a smile. He's looking straight at the person in front of him. Let's see, top middle, the middle smiling, right bottom. The right bottom and on the right, I would say that one could go either way. She in this picture, this avatar, it looks like she's slouching a little and I can't see her eyes. So it's hard for me to make an interpretation yet. It could go either way. But you get the idea. This is what the participants were obviously coached on how to rate these. And then what did they find? So if you look at page 35 in the workbook, it shows you on the graph that the higher prices were associated with those four CEOs that are above the axis. So it looks like three of them, or at least two of them, are ones we talked about. So it gives you not that they directly affected the price, but it shows there is a correlation between perceived impression and how well a company does. And it's no wonder that John Chambers of Cisco, before he left the company after 20 years, Steve Jobs with Apple, there are a ton of famous CEOs associated with strong brands that they're the face of the company. So if you're the face of your company or your brand or your initiative or your idea, or you're a leader within your company, you better be carrying yourself with confidence, good posture, no slouching, looking at your target. So what does this mean? What did the researchers conclude? Here's what they concluded. CEOs' perceived competence and attractiveness had a significant impact on company valuation. What else did the researchers conclude from this study? Perceptions are formed rapidly, and they are based on a wealth of nonverbal information, including gestures, body movement, dynamic facial expressions, eye gaze. So the final conclusion from the researchers who did this study, a leader has to be able to command attention, persuade and motivate people. So personal presence, even just the ability to make a strong initial impression, is important. So even before you begin the presentation or the meeting, how you come into the room, engage people makes the difference. And I'm just thinking here in a virtual setting. So Carmine, indulge me.
Oh,
You
Vanessa,
got
you just
muted, Vanessa.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, indulge me. What would you like me to do?
Lean back in your chair
Okay.
and slouch. Okay, now say The log line is the most important thing you could get from this course.
The log line is the most important thing you can get from this course.
Okay, now stop slouching, lean forward, sit on the edge of your chair, look at your camera, not the screen, and say it again.
The log line is the most important thing you can get from this course.
Okay, so we definitely need more energy with the voice.
Well, no,
But
I purposely
you did that on
try to
purpose.
deliver it exactly the same way, but just by changing your body language a little bit already adds a little more energy to it.
Yes. So if you're giving a leading a presentation around a table, for example, just the very act of sitting on the edge of your chair, putting your hands on the table, and whoever asks questions or interjects during your presentation, you face your body towards them. That's showing me that you're the leader of the conversation at that table. So always be thinking about your presence. It speaks more volume when we go to companies and work with executives and there's a whole bunch of people in the room. I can tell you who the CEO is. I can tell you who the leaders are by how they carry themselves more times than not.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole because we have a few other things to talk about, but Vanessa's absolutely right. And that's one of the first times I realized the power of what Vanessa brought to the table from psychology, from her psychology background. We were in a meeting and there were I had already met with the executives. Group of people came in, she came in to watch the presentations, and Vanessa quickly just kind of leaned over to me and said, so I guess that's the head of the department, and then that guy's new, and that person's, following along. I said, yeah, how did you know all that? Look at the way they carry themselves. So she could tell almost immediately who is the leader and who's the newbie. So this psychology of how you're coming across, how in your presence, people will judge you on that, whether it's intentional or not, whether it's conscious or not, but they can tell.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that, Carmine. Let's talk a little bit about gestures and eye contact. I could spend a long time on this, but for the spirit of giving you easy tips that you can take away and use right away, I did itemize a few things. You can look on page 36 and 37 in your workbook, kind of itemize these tips. But to talk about gestures at first, I want to show you a clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson. We've heard from him about metaphor, right? I believe Carmine used him as an example of the king of metaphor. He's also an example of somebody who has a naturally strong vocal tone. One of his strengths is he's got a great voice, the way it sounds. I like what he says about using gestures as a communicator. Let's watch.
Words communicate, yes. The spoken word can do a very good job, but you're not limited to that. You can have facial expressions. You can smile. You can look sad. You can tip your head. You have hands you can gesture with. You have eyebrows. Why not allow your body to participate in the act of communicating? It will double your effectiveness in that instant. My hands illustrate a scene. I talk about Earth orbiting the sun. I talk about the spiral galaxy in which we live. It's called the Milky Way, if you hadn't remembered that. I will talk about when the sun becomes a red giant and it bloats. I will add my body to the words I speak as a communication tool.
My favorite line in there, why not allow your body to participate in the act of communication? And I don't know where this took place, but a lot of people feel like in a presentation they have to be formal, and they put their hands together, or they keep themselves contained, and that is not what the body wants to do. So if you were to see a cat and you take your hand and you try to pin down the cat's tail, what does the cat do? What does the tail do? What happens? Have you ever done that? Have you ever tried to pin down a cat's tail? Dre.
It springs back up just in a
It springs back up. Sometimes it'll flip like, don't touch me, leave me alone. This is the dynamic between our hands and our minds. Our minds are full of thoughts and ideas. And especially if you have not internalized your content, you need your hands to execute the delivery of the message. So if you try to keep your hands contained, then I start seeing the shoulder wobbling or this mechanical, I'm using my hands, but now I'm trying to be formal. And that's all I look at. I get distracted. So that's the first tip. Let your hands be available. Just don't worry about your hands. Just worry about your message and let your hands follow suit. You also want to use plan gestures sparingly. Don't overthink your gestures. Obviously, if I'm going to tell you 3 things, I might use this gesture, 1, 2, 3. That's okay. Or if I'm really excited, I might want to raise my hands up. There are some gestures that are effective, but don't overthink it. I also want you to think about what's called the power sphere, right? So the power sphere runs from eye level out to as far as your arms go to your core. This whole space is called the power sphere. And very few people use that as much as they should. I'm 5'1", so my power sphere doesn't take up as much space. Carmine's 5'11", his takes up more. So you want to use your space, and it's going to be different depending on your composition. So if I'm talking and I never use my hands and my hands are always below my waist, it screams low energy, it screams lack of confidence, it screams low interest. Not necessarily the case, but that's what it that's what it indirectly communicates. If I'm using my space, it shows more energy, more excitement. So think of your power sphere in terms of your gestures. And even if you're presenting at a table, keep your hands above the table. Don't put them underneath. So always be thinking about your space. Those would be the 3 main tips I would keep in mind for effective gestures. Let's talk about eye contact. And before we do that, just remember to maximize your presence on screen, right? That would be to utilize your space. Let's go to the tips on eye contact, right? I have a couple. Now, don't talk when looking at notes. That's a hard one to do, right? We all look at notes, and that's okay. The biggest problem I find, executives will look at their prompter way too much. And it's okay to look at your prompter, but I want you to think of your brain as a camera. You're going to look down at your prompter, see what the next thing is, click, take the photo, bring the photo back up to your audience, then start talking. So it's like a rhythm. Look at your notes, come back up. And here's what I want to talk about next. Whereas there's this habit of talking and looking at the same time, then you get that disconnect. Like it becomes too obvious that you're looking at notes. And that just takes practice. You always want to keep your face on your listeners. And if it's a smaller group, that's easier to do. During this Zoom, oftentimes I'll go through and I'll scroll through the arrows so I can see everybody's face. Now, that just helps me to understand, are people listening? Are they interested? It's harder to do in Zoom. If you're in a larger crowd, it's with a lot of people, I usually divide the room into like triads. So when I have this slide, I'm going to talk to the right. When I have the next slide, I'm going to talk to the middle. When I have the next slide, I'm going to do this side, and then I rotate. Just to kind of give your energy to the whole room. Keep eyes steady. Okay, this probably the last tip on this page is the most important. Keep your eyes steady for key messages. So if I'm going to tell you something that's really important, I'm going to stop moving and I'm going to look you straight on. If I don't look at anybody and I'm moving the same time I'm saying it, it loses its power. If there's a really important key point in your presentation, you want to stop moving and really give it the power that it needs. Slow down the delivery, stop moving, just say the line. So that's a good tip. I want to show you one short video before we talk about the next step, wrapping up and our homework. Any last minute questions on gesture or eyes before I show you this last clip? Anything coming to your mind that you want to talk about or ask? Sometimes this conversation conjures up thoughts. Chioma.
Hi, thanks. So something that I was just thinking about, I love the direction that you're giving us. Like you can look at different sections of the room. What happens to me pretty often is I'll look at someone in the eyes and then I'll just go blank. And so I'm kind of like looking over people's heads a little bit. Is that okay? And then then I get in my head about where I'm looking, and then I look at the person, then it's crazy.
Yeah.
Does that work as well to just look over?
I think you might be overthinking it. You know what I'm noticing right now? You actually have a very expressive face.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a really nice smile
Thanks.
and you seem look at, you just did it right there. Beautiful smile.
Thank you.
And this, the few times you've spoken, I've noticed you have a lot of energy. So I wouldn't worry so much about that. Just be who you are and you're going to be fine. And if you feel like you're looking over the heads, I think that's less of a worry as just crafting strong messages that'll keep your face smiling.
Okay.
I just noticed real quick, Sonia in the chat mentioned an analogy that I have actually used with her before. The metaphor of the dancer on stage. I was a dancer for years and I used to be so amazed at how much makeup you have to put on. I mean, literally, you look like a doll with tons of blush and red lipstick and lots of eye makeup. Close up, it looks silly, but when you're on the stage and the lights are showing, you can't see the makeup as much. But it's the same thing with gestures, that if you're speaking into a bigger crowd and you're not using gestures, it's like a dancer with no makeup. You can't see the energy. So always be thinking from far away. It may seem awkward and weird to use big gestures or to have more energy, but to the audience, it doesn't. It's just right.
Remember, Vanessa, I don't know if you recall, but every once in a while, Vanessa and I will put somebody on video and tell them, it's just us, it's just the three of us. Why don't you just go all out and have more energy and use your gestures in a way that you just think is ridiculous? And we'll just play with it. And then we'll record them, show it back, and they're terrific. But inside they feel like, because they've been so constrained that just, showing a little emotion makes them feel uncomfortable. So a lot of this, actually, you can be your own coach by putting yourself on video. Watch yourself back, no matter how uncomfortable. We all hate watching ourselves, but it's a good technique, it's a good tactic, and it's right there on your phone. Record yourself. See how you're coming across.
All right, thank you, Carmine. I want to show this clip, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the homework, and we're going to wrap up. We've enjoyed these 4 sessions. This is Robin Roberts. She is a famous news commentator, and she did a master class on communication. And in this clip, she's talking about the importance of eye contact, but even a bigger picture, she's talking about the importance of effective communication and what it means for you in general, in being successful and making connections. And I think it's a good way to end this portion. So let's watch.
What is authentic and effective communication? This, right now. I know I can't see you, but you can see me. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you in your eyes. When's the last time that someone has done that? How many times do people pass by you on the street or you're at work or something and they say morning and they're not even looking at you? Don't even give you good morning. This is morning, not even looking at you. So I'm going to show you and share with you why that is important, how to do that, why you should do that, the benefits of doing that. Why should you communicate clearly? effectively, if if you know how you can get through this life without doing that, would you let me know? Because I don't know how you can do that. I don't know why you would want to do that. I cannot think of any line of work, anything that you're doing that you are not going to benefit greatly by being able to communicate effectively.
So you all participated in these 4 sessions with us because you value effective communication. We hope that we have given you enough tools that you can implement right away, and don't be hard on yourself. Don't change who you are. And because I respect the value of individuality, each and every one of you is going to have a little different need in terms of how you could develop, which is why we include the one-on-one 20-minute coaching sessions. So if you haven't had a chance to go to the Google sign up doc, anyone who goes to the link can edit. You select the time, put your email so we can send a Zoom link for that time. It's important that we get your material at least 48 hours before, so we have time with our busy schedule to review it, because we want to economize that 20 minutes and make it as productive as possible. Be creative what you want to. We need something for the 20 minutes to use to work from. So you could send us a 2-minute video of a presentation or an idea. You could follow the message map that we gave you for homework for that 2-minute video. Or if you don't want to mess with video, a presentation deck that you might have, an outline for something you've got coming up, an email memo. Sometimes we've had executives send us email reports that we've gone through and kind of given them how to clean it up and make it look better. You can choose what you want to use for the 20-minute session. We do need something tangible to work from, so it's productive. We'd love for you to take advantage of that. So at this point, I want to thank you for participating. It's been a joy to hear your input, your questions, your ideas. Carmine, any last words before we pass to Allison?
Well, again, the big theme, and we're going to get to know more of you who sign up for the one-on-one, but the big theme I hope you take away from today and the other sessions is, after this, do not give a presentation. You're a storyteller first. What's the story? What's the outline? What's the key message? What's the journey that you want to take people on? How are you going to make that idea come alive and be creative? Then you can create a presentation if you like that complements the story, but you're the storyteller. What is your authentic voice and your authentic, unique story? Let's get that down first, and then the compliment comes. That's the easy part, but you're the storyteller. Excellent. Thank you so much for participating. It's going to be fun to get to know you more on the one-on-ones. Allison?
Yes, thank you so much. On behalf of the School of Design and our department, the Harvard Executive Education Department, we're so thrilled that you were with us for the last 4 days. I just want to give a big round of applause to you and Carmine and Vanessa for the last 4 days. You did it. We are here. Congratulations. My colleague just threw the evaluation link in the chat. It's going to be a little longer today. There's one section on today's session, and then historically your overall impression of the course. So we're going to pause. It's really important to us. We look at this report year over year. So we're going to pause for 30 seconds to let you get in there, and then we will wrap up and move to our informal session. Thank you so much. Great. Please do keep evaluating, but I want to make sure that we recognize the formal end of the session. I also am just reposting those 2 links. If you'd like to come in person, there's the 2 days of presenting with confidence that are on campus, and then the following 2 days are the kind of 2.0 to presenting with confidence. So if you're interested or you know people on your team who'd be interested, please let them know. We'll also have another iteration of presenting with confidence online in 2025. But again, on behalf of our department, thank you so much for your time and attention. It was a joy to be your moderator. I'm now going to close the formal session and move on to informal. You have Carmine and Vanessa for the next 15 minutes, whatever's on your mind and heart. And we do hope that you sign up for your 1 optional slot. So again, if I don't see you for the informal, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to get to know you. And please, anyone unmute, share your thoughts. You had lovely things to say in the chat.
Thanks, everyone. Bye to those of you who are leaving. Bye.
For the 15 minutes, this is open mic. Anything, Mona, do you have anything on your mind? Aaron, Jordanis?
Any questions that didn't come up in the sessions that we can?
Hi, I have a question, and thank you, Vanessa and Carmine. This has been a really terrific course and greatly appreciated. My question is, one thing that I've noticed I do unwell in presentations, especially taped recordings, is that I tend to blink a lot. I think it's probably because I'm quite nervous, but in watching recordings of myself, I find it actually distracting. It's not very pleasant to see. And so I was just wondering if you have any tips for avoiding that?
Well, I've been watching you as you've been talking, and that's not an issue at all.
Correct, but when I have, you know, when I'm taped for a video recording that my organization then uses, when I watch those videos, I'm blinking every few seconds.
Yeah, you're probably just nervous, and that's okay. I get nervous too. Gosh, I had to do something in New York because I write for Inc. And then a few years ago, I was in New York. They wanted me to record something. And I found myself unusually nervous, you know, because the camera, all of a sudden the red light's on. And I feel like everything I say has to be perfect, forgetting that they're probably going to edit it. And that happens to all of us. But if it's not something that happens every time you present, like obviously it's not, I don't overthink it. That's just something that was only a reflection of nerves. So if you do those type of recordings in the future, practice those recordings. The best way to get over those nerves is to put yourself on video and do it yourself many times. Pretty soon, when the red light actually does go on, you've already done it 10 times. It's old hat to you.
I think the 2 tips I would give would be using extra words, playing with the mic or fidgeting or ums and ahs or blinking eyes. All of that stuff happens when the brain is trying to figure out what it wants to say next. So really just really work on keeping your thought for each slide or each portion of your presentation, keep it simple. Just the most important points, come up with a story or something that's really familiar to you or a case example that you could plug in there and just go through it a few times before you actually deliver it. It's like driving a car. I don't know when I turn the blinker on, but I know I do it when I change lanes. It has to become automated for you to forget the blinking. I'd also have a bottle of water near you. Like if you were to, you say, here's a slide, I say the point that now we're going to talk about this, pick up the water, take a sip. It hydrates you. It kind of resets, and maybe those are 2 tangible things that I would recommend, and just keep working at it. Don't let it consume your thoughts.
This brings up a point though, because Teo brought up a good point. She only caught that after she saw herself on video.
Yeah, video is a good tool.
Put yourself on video and you will catch your own distracting habits, for lack of a better word. And there's, things that we all do. Maybe we look away too much instead of looking at the camera, and it's kind of distracting. And you don't even realize it until you put yourself on camera. And I've noticed very few people do that. Practice putting yourself on camera first. Watching it back yourself, you're going to catch 80% of the issues.
Looks like we have Shahina and then Aaron. We'll go with Shahina first.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, Carmine, for an excellent 4 days. The content, I think, it's been impressive. My one question was, you touched on it a little bit when you try to memorize word by word, especially people who might be English as a second language like me. So you are always afraid I'm going to lose words or the structure or make some grammatical error. So I would try to memorize word by word. But what that does is then you are so focused on remembering the delivery and the lines that your, gestures are gone, the tonicity or tonality that you were talking about earlier, all of that, it does not remain natural. So I have gone back and forth from memorizing my, speech or whatever to say, I'm going to just deliver it naturally. And I don't know, because I go back and forth and I don't know which one is better or what you recommend.
I think it depends. If you are presenting a presentation multiple times, the same presentation, it is much easier to become automated, right? You will get that material internalized, that when this slide comes up, oh, I know this is what I'm going to talk about. It's much easier in that type of situation. If you are giving novel presentations once and you're not going to be repeating them, it can be harder. So I would definitely, when this slide is up or this is the topic, I'm going to hit this story and I'm going to hit these points. You got to memorize the main parts. It's okay if the words aren't exactly the right, but you got to have the main points.
But what if it's not a slide presentation, if it's a speech that you're giving over 15, 20 minutes, like where you're not going to get any prompts that you could break down?
You definitely need to memorize the content, but I wouldn't worry so much about having every single word perfect, as long as you have the anecdotes, the examples, the key points memorized for each portion. That's the most important. And I do believe that repetition makes things seem more natural. The more you repeat, the more natural it is. How much time you can do that before the actual speech is up to the schedule, but I do believe it does make it easier.
Okay. Before I go off, the two quick things. I was not able to download the presentation. Are we able to download from the page that we have just to keep it for ourselves to refer back?
Are you talking about the slide deck or the?
Yeah, both slide deck and the home workbook.
Huh, okay, they are PDFs, so you'd have to have a PDF, reader, but I'll go double check those links right after class. Thank you for letting me know.
And lastly, you guys are recording the session. Are we going to be able to access the recording or no?
No, unfortunately, the recording's for internal use only, but.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
It looks like, Aaron, you have a question. Thank you for waiting.
Yes, thank you. I have been told, similar to what Shahina was bringing up, that I nervous laugh, which I just did. Sometimes when I'm presenting, and so it's sort of like I'm trying to be natural, and I'm sure it's just like it's a reaction to trying to be friendly and approachable, which is good, but then it takes away from kind of like the seriousness of what I'm presenting. So I'm wondering if you have any similar recommendations for that.
Yeah, I think it probably depends. I hope you signed up for a one-on-one, because it would be good for us to just send us a sample script or a PowerPoint deck, and we can look at it and think, ooh, it'd be great if she could tell a story here, or it'd be great if she could do this here. And I think if we can do that, you have to build in something somewhere in there that's personally connected to you. It doesn't have to be a personal story, but it has to be something interesting to you, so that when you deliver it, it serves as an icebreaker for yourself. That when I'm going to say something that's of emotional nature or connected to me somehow, it's easier to deliver without being nervous. But without knowing the example or the context, it's hard to know where we do that. But I think that would be the key for you, and just practice, really. I know practice seems like we overuse it, but it's repetition. I have a 19-year-old who was deathly afraid of spiders. We put photographs of real spiders all over the house. I remember the first time I did it, it took her like a whole day just to have enough, nerves, just to have enough strength to pass the photographs and enter her own bedroom. Like they were just photos. I couldn't understand why just a photograph immobilized her. And then over a month of being exposed to those photos, then I moved into new locations. Now she's okay. She can see a spider. She might still scream, but she doesn't have to leave the room when she sees it. It's the same thing with this. That will pass if you force yourself to just take all the opportunities you can take to get over it. And we got to look at your content. How can we infuse certain things in here that will make it interesting for you to share, and then that will relieve the nerves. Hopefully this makes sense.
Totally. Thank you.
Erin, what's the topic area that you typically present on?
They're all different, but the latest one was basically, so I work in communications at a nonprofit, and I was presenting to our executive team about how we engage folks along the engagement ladder, from sort of like getting their awareness about our issue all the way up to making them sort of donors to our cause.
Okay. All right. So more informational than
Yes.
really. Okay, good. Yeah. So maybe that's what we'd like to see that. Or if you're working on a new one, but we want to see that presentation ahead of time, and then let's go through part of it on one-on-one and see how you come across.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like Sonia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I did that presentation last night, and what I found, I find this very interesting, is I implemented a lot of the things we've learned through this course. Logline, the three key points, metaphors. I'm not the person that naturally comes up with metaphors, so I use ChatGPT to come up with some metaphors. Used my personal story, used some couple of case studies, multisensory slides with videos.
Oh, great.
And everybody loved it. People were writing. I couldn't see, I wasn't paying attention to the chat because this was on Zoom while I was presenting, but I went back and watched the recording and read all the comments. And then people were texting me and they were like, this should be mandatory viewing. Everyone in the field, this needs to be mandatory. This was the best call ever.
All
And
right.
it was because I implemented all these things, because I went back and started watching the recording and I found myself saying so too many times. I found myself repeating a couple things, but what it taught me is it kind of mirrored like how you did this course, like learning all these tactics. And then this last session was now our own speaking presentation, how we speak. So it showed me that just by making those changes, it made it the most impactful presentation that I've ever done. Even Amy is the co-owner, and the other owner of the company put it on his Facebook today that everybody has to watch this. And now I can kind of focus on, like, continue doing those things, but focus on getting better with my actual speaking and pausing and not
Right.
repeating.
And those things that you see as mistakes, okay, probably didn't really make that much of a difference. And the other thing we should add here is often we overthink it. Okay, so that if oh my God, I used a filler word, and then you get in your own head, and pretty soon it's not natural, and it just doesn't flow like a conversation. So the other lesson from all of this is, yes, implement all of these things, but don't lose your personality. Don't overthink it, because those little things that you blow up in your own mind as a mistake, no one even sees it. That's all they see is this was the best presentation ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think the key here is we focused on messaging for the first 3 sessions because that we believe is the most important. The body language piece comes naturally. We're running out of time, but Edward, we'll speak more in our one-on-one. Edward shared a little bit about he's become blind in one eye, and that has given him a challenge in terms of lights are too bright or being able to focus on So I can see that must be a very unique challenge for you. It makes me think of Carmine's brother a few years ago went completely deaf in one ear. So it's a challenge for him. He's a retired cardiologist, but when he's trying to communicate, he has to position himself a certain place or else he doesn't hear on one side. So we'll talk about that on our one-on-one since we're running out of time, but thank you for sharing that. And I'll put my creative hat on to figure out ways we can help you there.
Well, great.
And
Thank you so
Vanessa,
much, Vanessa and Carmine.
Oh,
I have one more thing really quick. I'm sorry, Allison.
It's okay.
So Amy introduced me and then she came in at the end, but I just wanted to say one of the other things that we learned from you with the Frappuccino and the pizza and then making that comparison, she used that tactic at the end where we were talking about a certain rank level in our company, certain income level, and she used it to compare it to when you get here, this is like the income of an anesthesiologist. She did some research. So it was so
I like
cool.
that comparison. That's great.
That's clever.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy the tactics are being put into play immediately. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
That's a lovely note, Sonia, to end on. Thank you again for all your time, the extra 15 minutes, and I know your coaching opportunities are going to go swimmingly well. So thank you again. Have a lovely holiday break, and hopefully we'll see you online or in person soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
We'll see you. Bye.